So let's start with one last night in the name that might be most familiar to you guys. He was a hot name in the recruiting class a year ago for Alabama. Caleb Odom, a wide receiver who was, again, a five-star in last year's recruiting class. He's an absolute giant. He's 6'5", I think 235 now. He's listed at 227, but I think he has gained weight since he's been to Alabama. Is he a wide receiver? Is he a tight end? He plays wide receiver, but he's got a tight end build at that size. Committed to Ole Miss last night. Only 7 catches on the season. This is more of an upside pickup as opposed to a production
potential
pickup.
Overproduction.
No doubt. And it's an interesting thing that is happening with Ole Miss as well with their receiver recruiting. That the 2 receivers they've gotten so far are significantly bigger than the ones that they trotted out there a season ago when Trey Harris was not available. And I can't help but wonder, all the woes in the running game, you go back and think about it, the number of safeties, defensive backs that made tackles in Ole Miss's running game. I wonder if the lack of physicality at receiver also hampered them in the run game, because their receiver recruiting to this point has been, with the exception of Singleton, who everybody and their brother wants,
right?
Big-bodied receivers. I mean, they've 6'2", 210, and now 6'5", 295 pounds, apparently. But they are certainly after bigger receivers, because once Harris went down, if you look at who they played,
small guys. Yeah.
And they can be effective. Like Caden Lee had a great season, and he'll be back, but you
got to have
really
some big
can't
bodies.
have 4 Caden Lees playing wide receiver for you.
Right. You got to have some big bodies, guys who can, physical their way into tough catches, can be red zone targets. And like you said, as much as Ole Miss likes to run the football, they need to be able to block a little bit. So, yeah, that's that's something to keep an eye on as they try to, like I said, if you've got those guys, if you got those small, shifty guys, you got to have some balance there. You can't have 3 or 4 guys like that.
And you look at players of the past, their NFL receivers that they had, with the exception of Elijah Moore, their real most recent one, but Mingo, still playing in the NFL, was a second-round pick. Physical, right? Was a willing blocker. A.J. Brown, physical, willing blocker. Laquan Treadwell, physical, willing blocker. That was kind of their pedigree, and they just didn't have that last year at all. And so far in the portal, they've gotten a couple of guys that fit that mold a lot better. So that's number one. Number 2, on the offensive line, Delano Townsend. He is a transfer from UAB on the offensive line. He's a guard. And I don't know much about him. I mean, he's 6'4", 315. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. And that's another theme with Ole Miss's portal class so far. Guys with a lot of eligibility left. I don't think there's a single one-year rental, as I refer to them, in this class. Now, maybe one has a great season and goes after one, but there is not like the senior yet so far in this class. This is a guy with 3 years remaining of eligibility. I know Pro Football Focus is a coach's least favorite thing, but according to their charts, in 430 pass block attempts, he gave up 1 sack this past season. So good number there. I am very much going to be in wait-and-see mode for Ole Miss on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Because last season they returned 4 of 5 starters and brought in 4 portal players, and they got worse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're adding on the offensive line. They've got a guy from Charlotte, this guy here, guy from Arkansas. On paper, great. Multiple years of eligibility, sure, fine, whatever. But until I see improvement, I'm not going to spend my offseason like I did last offseason talking about, hey, they've got the guys that can improve.
Yeah.
Need to see it first before I do any of that this
Absolutely.
offseason.
Yeah, same way with State. Especially on this defensive side of the ball, I'm glad they're getting players, but I do have to see them in action before I'm going to buy into any improvement. Both State and Ole Miss, different stages of wait and see. State is much deeper into it, but excuse me. But yeah, with Ole Miss, it was surprising because they got quality guys.
They did,
and I thought it just didn't gel. And I think part of that was all of the shenanigans at running back. Because you want to have a guy back there that you can just rely on, and they didn't have that.
They're working on that. They're trying that anyway.
Whatever.
A lot of wide receivers,
I'll play somebody. But anyway, yeah, they this year with Ole Miss, they've got to be better on the offensive line because now they got to protect the guy in Simmons who just doesn't have the same experience as Dart. Not going to have that same awareness to get the ball out quickly. You got to be better.
And I'm not a coach. The next college football game, my coach will be the first one. But I do think something's amiss on the offensive line because I've seen people over the last couple of days say, well, they're not developing their high school guys enough. All of their high school guys, they don't play and they transfer out. But my counter to that would be 4 of your 5 starters from 2023 came back and you regressed as a unit. Why?
Yeah.
Because then that speaks to poor development from guys that you already had on your roster. So you failed in evaluation and also failed in development. I mean, it's a multifaceted thing. Something's got to give here because that was simply not good enough. And when it comes to personnel, at least on paper, they checked all the boxes. Returning starters, 4 portal guys. And it got worse. So something's up there. I don't know what it is, but I know that something's wrong, and they need to fix it. Finally, Jaden Yates, a linebacker. Ole Miss desperately needs linebackers, especially now that Chris Paul is off to the NFL. A Marshall transfer, had 115 tackles this season, a highly productive linebacker. Had some interest from other places, is ending up at Ole Miss. So those are your 3 portal pickups since we got off air at 6 o'clock for Ole Miss. And they needed linebackers. It is a step up in competition, of course, from the Sun Belt to the SEC. So we'll see if that translation happens. But a productive linebacker for sure on the Sun Belt champion. And we'll see if he can take that step forward and become a productive SEC linebacker as well.